Hey guys, today I'm going to be reacting to a video called The Fascinating Human Scale Urbanism of Dutch Suburbia. So I wasn't aware that they had suburbia in the Netherlands, because in my mind, it's like, well, when I think of suburbia, I think of like the USA version. And it's just basically a bunch of houses, identical houses, literally the same house, the same layout. They're painted in the same color, like everything's the same. And they're all, like right next to the other. So it's like, 30 houses that they all look the same. And it's just like one street, and there's a lot of cars. Like no one walks because they don't really have any shade or trees, or there's like nothing really like around it. It's just like more houses. So why would people just like take a walk? Well, you can take a walk around the neighborhood, but you're not gonna find anything interesting because all the houses are the same. And again, like people rarely walk, because again, there's nothing. So when I think of the word suburbia, that's what my mind goes. So I had no idea that the Dutch had something like that, especially because I'm thinking, well, the thing about suburban and the suburbs is that it's usually like far away from like the downtown or like the city center, or jobs and basically everything, grocery stores, whatever, name it. Like there's nothing nearby, just more houses. And when I think of the Netherlands, I think of bike. I think of people biking around. So I'm thinking, well, how can it be a suburbia if people need cars? At least that's what I have it in my head. It's like, well, in order to live in the suburbs, like you need a car to get around the city, because again, there's just houses. There's nothing there. So in order to like live your life, you need a car to get out of the suburbs and actually go and experience like the city. So it's a really foreign concept to me, but apparently they have it. So I'm super curious to find out. So let's start.
What does a suburb look like in the famously bike-friendly country of the Netherlands? It's one thing to inherit human-scale cities, built before cars even existed. But what can the Dutch teach us about building sane suburbs in the modern era? On our recent trip, we made sure to visit some newer, lower-density residential developments on the edge of Amsterdam and The Hague to see just how they compare to suburbs back home in North America. What we found changed our perspective on cities and urbanism, and made us wonder whether the suburbs could be for us. We visited lots of different neighborhoods, but our footage is mainly from these four: De Bongerd in Amsterdam Nord, Eendracht on the western edge of Amsterdam, Beesland in the southeastern edge of The Hague, close to Delft, Sion in Rijswijk, a municipality south of The Hague, also close to Delft. These are more or less random neighborhoods that we came across while walking, biking, and ferrying around. As far as we know, they're not special or unique. They were all built in the past 30 or so years, and 2 of them are directly adjacent to major highways. What kind of urbanism does that give us?
Okay, that's what I was expecting. Well, sort of, not really, but...
These neighborhoods have population densities between 5 and 10,000 people per square kilometer. That works out to about half or a third of the densities you'll find in central Amsterdam or The Hague. But it's also double or even triple the densities you'd find in typical suburbs in Canada or the US.
Oh, really?
One of these developments was actually advertised as rural living, which is fascinating because this would be considered the lower end of urban density in most major cities in the US and Canada. It's a pretty compelling livability balance, though. Urban enough to have amenities, transportation options, and be a relatively efficient use of land and infrastructure spending, while still providing more personal space and open space than you'd get with higher densities.
These 4 suburbs have a mix of housing, from detached and semi-detached homes to apartments, mainly low-rise. But the basic building block of Dutch suburbia seems to be the townhouse or row house. Compare that to Canada or the US, where suburbia is heavily based on the ideal of the single-family detached home.
Yes.
Townhouses and small apartments aren't entirely rare, but they're the exception to the pattern, often tucked away in their own corner of the neighborhood and, we will always bring this up, not legally allowed to be built on most land. Having a variety of housing options makes neighborhoods more interesting and accessible.
Absolutely.
And townhouses in particular are a sweet spot for affordability, at least when built on cheaper land.
Oh, they're cheaper.
Townhouses use less land than detached homes, and they're cheaper to build than taller structures. We'd never say you can't raise kids in an apartment, but townhouse suburbs are a good middle ground for families with children, for the mix of affordability with space and a backyard.
Yeah. I can see that.
The basic idea of a suburb is that you give up proximity to the central city, and in return you get more space for less money. This is a normal and valid trade-off to make, especially for families with children who want more room. But North American suburbs often take this to the extreme, mandating large decorative yards that dilute the density and contribute to sprawl without really being that useful.
Yeah.
The Dutch suburbs that we saw usually provided some form of backyard, arguably the most useful of the yards, while eliminating side yards with the townhouses and having more modest space in front of the house. It can be nice to have a place to sit out front, but it's kind of crazy that it's the norm and even the law in lots of places to have so much empty grass out front. Some of the closest equivalents to front lawns that we saw in these Dutch suburbs were more like communal courts or playgrounds, which seemed great for kids.
Yeah.
Easily the most unique and fascinating part of Dutch suburbs from a North American perspective is how small the roads are. Everyone knows to expect narrow streets in the medieval city centers, but these newer developments built in the past few decades also incorporated surprisingly small streets. In a suburban part of our city in North America, a residential street might be 8 to 10 meters wide, not including sidewalks where they exist. Through routes are wider, but this is the norm for the smallest local streets that just provide access to homes. In the Dutch suburbs that we visited, residential streets are commonly half that width, at just 4 to 5 meters wide.
Small.
From a North American perspective, that is on its way to becoming a pedestrian pathway, and that's kind of the point.
It's true.
These roads provide access for cars, but they slow down traffic and put the whole neighborhood at more of a walking or cycling pace. Exactly what you want for an area where children are exploring and playing. Some of the roads through the neighborhood literally were pedestrian and cycling pathways, which are even narrower at 3 to 4 meters wide. In some places, these formed almost a parallel road network, crossing bridges that cars aren't allowed on. Even when residential streets were a bit wider and closer to the norm of North America, the section used for parking on the side was often set apart structurally and visibly, making the street feel narrower and ensuring that the absence of parked cars wouldn't just provide more road space for cars to drive fast.
Yeah.
If there's any one lesson we want people to take away from these suburbs, it's that we can and should rethink our basic street network in residential areas. Smaller streets and pedestrian pathways are not just for medieval city centers. We can also incorporate them into new residential developments.
Yeah,
and alongside bollards and other traffic calming, they can do wonders to set the neighborhood at a human scale and speed. How nice would it be to have a house that opened onto a bike path instead of a road? That sounds awesome.
That was very nice.
Of course, not all roads can be like this. Roads going in and out of the neighborhoods were a bit bigger, and you could use those roads to get to arterials or highways that were much bigger and faster. Still, even those bigger arterials consistently had adjacent bike pathways to get you into town.
That's
on top of being safer and feeling just more quaint and pleasant, smaller streets are also an advantage for density. They make the neighborhood more compact, without taking away from anyone's personal living space. Imagine what these neighborhoods would look like if you doubled or tripled the width of the roads. Another advantage of smaller streets is maintenance. One of the first things we noticed when we got back to Montreal was the awful condition of the roads. You notice the bumps and potholes, whether you're walking, cycling, driving, or taking a bus. There are probably multiple reasons for this in Montreal, from winters to corruption, but it has to be harder to keep your roads in good condition when a residential street is twice as big as it needs to be.
Okay, that's a good point, actually.
All of these suburban neighborhoods have some common needs located within them, whether schools, daycares, doctors, groceries, or a community center. You didn't have everything you needed close by, like you might have in a city, but it's at least an upgrade from the strictly residential neighborhoods we have in North America. Here in Canada, having a school within a suburban residential neighborhood is common, but stores and services are usually pushed to the edge of neighborhoods or even the edge of town.
As you'd expect for the Netherlands, all of these suburban neighborhoods have really excellent cycling connections to nearby city centers. Biking to central Amsterdam from its 2 suburban neighborhoods that we looked at is easy and just as fast as driving. Transit is roughly similar too. For the other 2 suburbs between The Hague and Delft, if you're going to Delft, cycling and driving are about equal. You could comfortably and safely bike to The Hague too, although for that trip, both cycling and transit are quite a bit slower than driving. There is a tram going between The Hague and Delft, through some countryside and lower density areas, but it doesn't cover these particular neighborhoods. Overall, there are definitely some trips that are faster or more convenient by car, but it depends a lot on where you're going, with cycling and transit being competitive or even faster for many trips too.
That's insane.
All of the suburbs we saw had car parking, but they tend to have it behind the buildings and in communal lots instead of a front driveway and garage for every single building. This probably saves space and definitely looks nicer.
Yeah.
We talked to someone in one of these townhouse suburbs in another Dutch city, and they said that most of their neighbors have one car per household, rather than the 2-car households that are pretty common in North America.
I'm surprised by the 1 car. I thought they didn't have any
We've
cars.
covered what these homes and neighborhoods look like in a general sense from the outside, but let's take a look at some specific homes you can get and how much they cost. The Netherlands is overall one of the more expensive countries in Europe for housing, so whether these suburbs seem affordable to you will depend a lot on how crazy the housing market is in your current city.
Okay,
in De Bongerd, in Amsterdam Nord, we found a 4-bedroom corner house built in 2008 for 685,000 euros. A corner house here means that it's 1/4 of a 4-home building. This one has 3 floors plus a rooftop patio for 144 square meters or 1,600 square feet of livable space. It has a 1-car garage on the first floor and seems to have a second parking space in a nearby lot. In Eindhoven, on the western edge of Amsterdam, we found a more affordable 3-bedroom townhouse for 400,000 euros.
Okay,
Built
that's
in 1990,
very cheap.
it has 96 square meters, or 1,000 square feet of living space across 3 floors, although the 3rd floor is a smaller, furnished attic. This home has a small front yard or porch area, and a larger backyard.
Oh, but that's pretty.
In Beesland, on the southeastern end of The Hague, we found a 5-bedroom luxury villa with 276 square meters, or 3,000 square feet of livable space, for 1.3 million euros. We also found a more modest 3-bedroom townhouse built in 2003 with a nice patio overlooking the water and 109 square meters or 1,200 square feet of living space for 375,000 euros.
I think it's
in
good.
Sion, northwest of Delft, we found a 4-bedroom townhouse built in 2016 for 620,000 euros that opens onto a pedestrian court and has a backyard.
I think
Nearby,
it's great.
in a similar neighborhood across the road, you can get a just-built 1-bedroom apartment with 48 square meters, or 520 square feet of living space, plus a nice backyard for 300,000 euros.
In North America, there's a frustrating assumption that density, bike infrastructure, public transit, pedestrian spaces, and other things we talk about on this channel are for big city downtowns where young professionals live in small apartments for easy access to work and social events, while sprawling car-centric suburbs are the natural and obvious environment for families with children.
Absolutely.
The Dutch suburbs that we visited blur the lines, showing that you can have 3 or 4-bedroom homes built reasonably compactly. You can have a backyard while living close enough to school for your kid to walk. You can have a parking spot or even a garage, as well as safe streets. And you can get out of the city while still having a world-class cycling network.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Visiting Dutch suburbs actually made us question whether we consider ourselves big city people. We like things like bike infrastructure and medium-density housing, and in North America, that generally means living in a central neighborhood of a bigger city like Montreal or Philadelphia.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands, these things are available in a lot more places. Even though we live in central Montreal, if we were to live in the Netherlands, we probably wouldn't choose central Amsterdam. We'd probably go for a more suburban area, or even more likely, a smaller city like Utrecht or Haarlem.
Oh, even smaller. Okay, so yeah, this was incredibly interesting. I have to say there are so many things that I'm like, okay, it's funny that they're the ones narrating. They're like, we consider ourselves like pretty like big city people, but then, you know, when they apparently they travel, I don't know if they live there or they just traveled, you know, as tourists and just visiting. They were like, actually, I can see myself like living here. And it's like, it's going to be a suburban thing. So maybe we're not as city people as we thought. And I think it's like, it goes to show that maybe like the things that you expect in your way of life, because again, they were like, they consider themselves city people. So why do you consider yourself, you know, a city dweller? It's like, well, because I like having maybe like, you know, things nearby. I like walking around and I like having things are just a walk from my apartment. Like, 5 minutes away, 10 minutes away. I can do I can go grocery shopping and it's gonna be okay. I don't need a car, and there's gonna be like a city center when there's like a lot of things to do in general. And it's like when they found themselves in the Netherlands, it was like, well, maybe we were starting to rethink this, because you can get all those things, but while still, and not necessarily while living in the city downtown and like in this apartment that usually downtown apartments tend to be like pretty small, no matter like what city like you're in. I think that city centers tend to be like it's hard to find like a big apartment. But it's like they're there, and it's like, no, you can find all those things that we like about the city that are in the suburbs. Actually, they're not near the hubbub of the movement, and how it's like this the popular, because let's face it, like most people, I think when it comes to like city, and when you say you like the cities, you actually like seeing a lot of like people, and you like being in the center of things. But it's like, no, you can get all of that also in the suburbs in the Netherlands, which I think is a little crazy. Because it's like, yeah, you see all those things, and it's like, in a way, it's kind of like they get the best of both worlds in a way. Because it's like they get all the things, like you can walk around, you have everything, but you don't necessarily have to live in this apartment. You can live in a townhouse, you can live in a detached house, and it's gonna be okay. Because I think, like I said earlier at the beginning, I was like, when I think of suburbia, I'm thinking of something that's gonna be like very far away from everything, and all the houses look the same, and you need a car to get around, because there's really nothing there except for like houses. It's not nice to walk around, and there's nothing to do except for more houses. But in this case, it's like, no, it's pretty to walk around. Like the houses are very pretty, and the streets themselves, I think they lend to actually like just take a walk around your neighborhood. I think that's the problem with a lot of cities, I think, in the USA, and also some countries or other countries that also, like Canada, for instance, that they don't really lend themselves to. It's not inviting. It's like, oh, I want to take a walk around my neighborhood, just like grabbing a coffee. Because everything is like, again, it's like there's nothing here, and you feel a little bit oppressed, and like, what would I walk around in this concrete thing? Like, it's just like pavement, and that's it, and more houses. But in something like this, where you have the canal, you have these beautiful trees, like there's a lot of things, and there's also a lot of like greenery. So it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you take a walk around your neighborhood? So I think it's like, again, it's like the best of both worlds, because you can find that you have that, and also things are nearby. You have like school districts, you have shops, you probably get a lot of like people, your place of employment is also nearby. So it's like, okay, I love that. And it's so funny that it's like we're seeing it. I'm like, so those are the suburbs, that they don't really look like the suburbs that I have in my mind, but it's probably because I'm thinking of like the USA version. But this situation is like, also those are the suburbs. They look completely like different than what I had in mind. But it's funny that they also, like, some houses are truly the same. Like, it's the same house, but like, it's the same house like 3 times. But it's funny that it doesn't look that oppressive as in the USA. Because also I think it's maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like also like the landscape. I think it's probably like the trees, actually. The trees and the greenery, and also obviously the canals. But in the other, again, in the USA, like, you have lawns. And I think Canada as well. You have like this lawn, and there's like, yes, it's grass. But it's like, it's a waste of space, because it's like the grass is always like, you need to have it like well maintained. Some people are like pretty obsessive about this, but it's like, it's there. Like, the grass is just simply there. In here, you can see how people actually do have gardens, and I can see some trees, that people do plant trees. They plant maybe like a herb garden, like you plant parsley and I don't know, rosemary. You have your little like lemon tree. And it's like, it's nicer that way. And even they have chairs in just for you to sit around, and maybe like, I don't know, have in the summer, like, it's gotta be nice to just sit around and watching, and people watching, because people also like walk around and bike around a lot. So it's gonna be super nice. And I think it just looks nicer also, just not just like in the logical point of view of it, of like of stuff being there. Like I said, like the schools and the jobs and all of that. It just looks visually appealing, and it looks nicer that way. And also obviously the canals, I think, do make a pretty big difference, is because you have like this beautiful source of water that you can just like, I don't know, imagine just like waking up in the morning and just like opening the window and looking down, and it's like, oh, it's like this beautiful canal. Like, that would be so nice. And to think of that as suburbia, that's like mind-blowing to me, because it's like, no, when I think of suburbia, I think of like concrete pavement, all gray and not, greenery and lakes and water. I do not think of that. So it's really funny that, the Dutch have it all figured out. And it's also, I think like the prices, it's funny because they were like, well, the prices do reflect, and you're going to be thinking, oh, it's going to be super cheap or it's going to be very expensive depending on, where you live or like the prices you've seen. But it's super funny because I was like, I don't think like that's bad. I don't know obviously what other sort of houses cost in the Netherlands. They just like did that example of like the suburbs. I don't really know how, like if it's cheaper or more expensive than actually like buying something downtown or closer to the center. But it's like, it's funny that it's like, I thought they weren't like so bad, because I was thinking when they said that, I was like, oh my God, it's gonna be so expensive. It's like, no, actually, like it isn't. Like there were like some pretty good prices, I think. And especially, I think the most expensive one was the one that was like over $1 million. But I think most houses in Canada, I don't know if Montreal specifically, but I know like Toronto, like the house market there, like it's insane. And a lot of places in the USA are insane as well. So it's like, when you think of like $1 million house, it's not a mansion. Like, no, it's just like a 3 or a 4 bedroom house, normal, like suburban, medium income house. Like it's just like a normal family you don't need to have, because when you think $1 million, it's like, oh, you're imagining like this huge house of like this mansion. It's like, no, not really. I think in Toronto especially, I think it's like an apartment I think can cost you like over $1 million, and it's not like this huge penthouse. This is like a normal house or a normal apartment for like a family of 4 or 3. So it's like, you know what? I think people are going to be moving in dubs to the Netherlands, I think. Especially after seeing this type of videos. I'm like, okay, so maybe what I'm hearing is that we should all move to the Netherlands, because everything is better. Like, again, they got it all figured out. It's like the best of both worlds. You get the sense of like, oh, I'm in the center of things, but actually not really, because I'm like, I'm not actually there. And I do have to say that something I found like very curious is the car situation. Because when they were showing the clips, I was like, oh, it's weird that the most houses, they do tend to have like one car. Most of them, I think, or at least like a great number of them, more than I was expecting, because I was like, well, I did see a lot of bikes parked around in the front, which I think is very funny. But hopefully they don't get stolen. But it's like, oh yeah, it's bikes. Obviously, I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of bikes, but also like I'm surprised by the amount of cars. And he's like, yeah, well, the average, I think, is just like one car per house. Which, I think it's a lot, because I'm thinking, I have it in my mind that, oh, almost no one has a car. And most people are probably like rent it out on the weekends, or, as needed basis. It's not you're going to have a car, because you're probably thinking it's just an extra expense that we don't really like. What are we going to do? We can just like bike run everywhere. So why would we want a car? Why would we like spend money on this? But it's apparently like, yeah, well, apparently people do have cars again. And maybe one of the, like, maybe it's a couple and one of them like works like farther than them, and then the other, and maybe they do need a car. Although it's like, when you look at the statistics, it's like both of them, like even in a bike or in a car, it's gonna take you the same amount of time to get to a certain place. So it's like, okay, so well, maybe but not really. I don't know. Maybe some of them are just like, again, I just really like driving and I want my car. I don't really do bikes. So maybe some Dutch people like that do exist. I think maybe they're outliers, but there's gotta be some Dutch people here living in the Netherlands, so they're like, no, I do not like bikes. I rather have my car. There's gonna be some of them. I think it's gonna be like a unicorn. You're not gonna find it like super easily, but I'm thinking like there's gonna be a few of them, and maybe that's why they're like, yes, we have like one car per household. But again, I get it, because it's like in the USA and other countries it's different, because if you don't have a car, like the public transport it's bad. Like you're not gonna get around anywhere, and obviously they don't really have like good like. It's not either the public transport or the bike situation. Like you can't really ride around in a bicycle because it's like a highway. So it's like you can't really do that. So everyone needs a car. So if it's a family of 5, then everyone's gonna need a car. And obviously in the Netherlands it's not like that. So maybe it's like, yes, it's just like one car per household. But even then, I find it like it's a little bit much than I was expecting. But yeah, this was a very interesting video, and that was it for today. And I'll see you next time. Bye!